G'day you beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at my rework idea for Dekker. Before we get into the video though, firstly I would like to say I apologise if there's a load of noise in the background. The place is a zoo right now with everyone screaming at each other, so I apologise for that. There's a bit of screaming. And I'd also like to start by saying that when I do these rework videos, I not only look through the character's history, I also look at other community members' suggestions. In some cases I go along with them, with perhaps minor tweaks. In some cases I will not, and I may provide feedback. That feedback is not me ridiculing that person, and it is not an invitation to ridicule that person. We should all be civil so that all our ideas can be heard and potentially create something great. As far as my videos go, my intention is to be as inventive and out there as possible, but in a lot of instances I will be keeping parts of the heroes' kits that I feel work very well and suit them. So also we know that passives are going to exist, so I'm going to include a passive for every hero, and I like the idea of having quests, so I will be suggesting quests for each of their abilities and their passive, but not for their ultimate. Quests will be an objective that is given to an ability, like hitting X amount of heroes with an ability, and upon completion will grant bonuses to that ability. Players, in my opinion, would choose an active ability that they want to receive a quest for at the start of the match. They will also get their quest for their passive as a standard, and hopefully have some sort of quest tracker on their UI, as well as having every hero's chosen quest visible on the scoreboard, so you can see what your allies and enemies are actually going for. Although I feel that with enough tweaking, all quests could be made available to each hero throughout the game, I'd much prefer to see a system where the player chooses one quest per match. That way they have one more way of tailoring their build to their playstyle and to suit also countering the enemy team. It's in my opinion that quests should be difficult but attainable and should also have strong rewards. However, I am not opposed to just giving each hero one quest instead of 4, and I'm aware that some of my quest suggestions may not even be possible due to tracking issues. With that said, let's get started. When it comes to supports that have currently been made available by Epic, we aren't exactly spoilt for choice. One of the 3 current options is Dekker. And Dekker has always been a good support, but to be honest, has fallen off at certain stages due to losing quote-unquote wombo combo synergy because of changes to other heroes like casters, and casters, individual casters falling off themselves. The 3 main characters that Dekker does well with is Howitzer, Gideon, and Gadget. With Howitzer losing popularity, Gideon losing damage on his ult, and Prepare to be Insulted, Gadget being a noob hero, you're left with, in my opinion, one caster that can take advantage of Dekker's ult, and that is the Fae. And let's be honest, the Fae don't need no help blowing up a team, especially at the end of Monolith. So why would you pick Dekker when you could pick Muriel for her global influence or Phase for her steroid injection? That's the problem, and that's what I'm hoping my suggestion fixes. Also, it is my hope to give all support some form of healing, so Dekker's getting a heal. Dekker, as far as I remember, was promoted as a support that excels at splitting up teams and isolating individuals, so I want to change a kit to accentuate that role a bit more. So first off, obviously basic attack, which is called Energy Orb. No changes except for re-implementing a very low power scaling like we used to have. So around 0.2, 0.3. In my opinion, carries should be around 1 power scaling. On basic attacks, fighters should be around 0.6, 0.7. Tanks should be around 0.4. And casters and support should be around 0.2, 0.3. Not going to stick to any of those numbers, but obviously there should be a difference in them all. You know, a caster that can do a lot of burst damage on their abilities shouldn't have very high basic attack damage. Same as tanks that can soak up a butt ton of damage should not have very high power scaling on their basic attacks. For Dekker's passive, I actually struggled for a while to come up with something until I watched Sylphan's suggestion for a Richter rework. Now, my passive will be almost exactly like that because I loved it, and I hate to use it on another hero, but it just actually kind of makes sense for her, considering that her job is to use crowd control to split up teams. So the passive is called Time Shift. Pretty bad name, I know. Every enemy affected by Dekker's crowd control grants 2% cooldown reduction, stacking 5 times. After applying CC effects 30 times, however, cooldown reduction per stack is increased to 3%. So that's her passive and her quest. So obviously that's going to be 10% cooldown reduction maximum once you hit 30 CC abilities on your quest. Your cooldown reduction will stack up to 15%, which I don't think is that strong. It is a little bit, I don't know. I just feel like she kind of has, she's kind of in a bad place, especially when you're considering that she's only up against Muriel and FaZe. FaZe can yank people out of fights. FaZe has ludicrous healing and cooldown reduction as part of her ultimate. She has slows to roots and blinds, whereas Muriel has global presence. She also has shielding, slows, a lot of damage on her abilities, and a speed boost as well. So, it's kind of hard to sort of balance her out, I suppose, against, but you do need to buff her a little bit because, as I said, she's up against those two. So her first ability, I chose to get rid of Rocket Boots completely. Even if you put it back to the way that it used to work, it's still pretty garbage. So I decided to add a healing ability, as I'd like to see all supports have some form of healing or shielding. So we have Healing Wave. Dekker emits a pulse that radiates, kind of now thinking that Healing Wave's a bit of a shit name, considering I worded it Dekker emits a pulse. Maybe it should be Healing Pulse. Dekker emits a pulse that radiates outwards, healing all allies in a 400 unit radius. Keep in mind that's a radius. Okay, so it'll be 800 diameter by 20% of their max health. Now, as far as numbers go on this, everything would have to be tweaked, so the only important thing is how the ability actually works. I feel that keeping a small radius will be good, as it means that she has to be in amongst it rather than being able to hang back, where she would be using the rest of her abilities. So she does have a heal, but she has to reposition herself to do so. The quest for healing, let's call it Healing Pulse. The quest for Healing Pulse would read, after healing allies 50 times, Healing Pulse will heal for 30% of allies' max health. Didn't want to go too silly with the increases, as it'll be very easy to finish, and considering that it is max health, some allies will be healed for a little, whereas tanks will be healed for a lot. So balance is quite important. It's really not going to be very hard to, heal a bunch of allies, considering that it's a radius heal. You just pretty much use it every time it's off cooldown. So moving on, Slow Bubble is making a return and won't really be changing. The quest for Slow Bubble reads, after slowing 30 enemies, mana cost is halved and duration is increased to 4 seconds. Didn't want to go too silly with the quest once again to make sure it balances out with the other two. So the next ability is Stasis Bomb, and I'm choosing to make a pretty big change to it. Obviously my hope is that Unleashed can make the ability more reliable, as it used to be a bit buggy. Also, for the longest time, it has bothered me that Stasis, as far as a card effect went, made a hero invulnerable to damage while also making them unable to move, and yet Stasis Bomb was a stun, and the stunned hero could be damaged. It just kind of didn't make sense. And also you have other MOBAs that have heroes with stasis abilities, and they work like my suggestion does. Dekker lobs a bouncing orb that puts enemy heroes into stasis upon contact for 2 seconds. So think of it as, the stasis card that you used to use. Sort of rises you up in the air, not that that's necessary, and it makes you invulnerable, but you can't use any abilities, you can't do any basic attacks, and you cannot move. So the quest for the ability would read, after hitting 20 enemy heroes with Stasis Bomb, increases duration to 3 seconds. Now yes, 3 seconds is a long CC, but you cannot be damaged while CC'd. This ability therefore is not necessarily best used on damage dealers during a fight like the old stun was. It could be that the best target for stasis is the enemy with the most CC or their tank. If you can stasis their tank, healer or crowd controller, that could massively shift the outcome of a teamfight. Now I tossed around the idea of making this her ultimate and extending the duration to maybe, 6 seconds while replacing her third ability with some form of straight line containment wall, but which I actually really do prefer as an idea, but I'm just a little bit worried that having some form of straight line containment fence wall, rather than a big circle fence. Just a straight line that's, say, 300 to 400 units long. Might be a little bit awkward to get its place correctly. Maybe they might have to add some way of spinning it around so you get it to go the way you want, which would just end up with you sitting there with your thumb up your butt for an extended period of time while you got it in the correct position. So I don't know. I am for that being a thing, and as I said, making Stasis Bomb a little bit stronger. But also considering the fact that Stasis Bomb is so easy to miss, it would probably then also have to be put onto some form of lock-on ability to make sure that you're not going to miss it. So instead of that, I decided to bring her ult back with one tiny change. I only suggest this change so that she can actually get assists from the use of her ult. It was always one of my biggest issues with Dekker, that you ult and cage a whole team, your allies delete them, and you get no assists. Obviously, you could get assists if you hit them with your slow bubble, your basic attacks, or a Stasis Bomb, but kills that were obtained for your team by simply putting your ult down never really counted. And that may seem like a bit of a selfish thing to want in the game, but nonetheless, I want to see that actually be a thing. So this change may actually seem silly, but keep in mind that is my reasoning for it. So it works exactly as it did, and this is the version that does not knock you back or anything like that. It's just a straight up containment fence. But it also does damage equal to 0.5% of the enemy's max health per second as ability damage. Now, I'm not set on that. It could be even lower. It could be 0.1. It could be 1 damage per second. It doesn't matter, just as long as she's doing something. Because, if you cage 5 people and you auto attack one of the enemies that is in that containment fence while your team deletes all 5, you get 1 assist, which just doesn't really seem fair to me, and it doesn't promote wanting people to continue to play supports. If you know that, you're not going to play Dekker if you technically get 30 assists in a match, but you only get 5 on the scoreboard because the other 25 were via your ultimate. So the damage is negligible, and I'm totally fine with it being less. This allowed up to about 2.5% of their max health over the 5 seconds that the ability lasts for at max level, because it does last for 5 seconds. As I said though, you could make that lower. That could be 0.2%, adding up to 1% of their max health. It doesn't have to. The damage is not the important thing. How much damage it does is not the important thing, rather. The fact is just doing a touch of damage so that you count as part of that kill. So my hope is just to give her more assists that she very much deserves for the use of that cage. And that's about it. So we have a hero that excels in changing the flow of a fight with clever use of slows, stasis, healing, and containment. I'd love to hear your opinion, so drop me a comment and let me know what you think, especially on the stasis side, and maybe what you think about making stasis her ultimate and replacing Stasis Bomb, the third ability, with some form of wall, a straight line wall. Love to hear what you think about that, and to the change to the ultimate. But with all that said, subscribe for more content if you aren't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love your face, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.